Hey y'all, welcome to your first year of drum lessons, week 26, drum pad edition. My name is Penny Larson and I am happy to have you with me today. Last week we didn't have a lesson. We've missed a couple lessons through the year as we've gone through. There are reasons why, but I had a professor in college who really got me down with the idea that excuses and reasons don't super matter, right? We didn't have a lesson last week. I apologize. I've been trying to keep you guys motivated every week. And part of that is me showing up in your subscription feed every week. And if I'm going to give you guys guff when you don't practice, I have to take guff when I'm not here for your lessons. I am not, I'm not hanging my head in deep shame. Things happen, right? And I am not acting like this is a major transgression on my part. But I want you all to know I feel bad for missing last week. And there are reasons, but who cares about the reasons? I missed last week. Let's pick up with this week. I'm really excited because this is week 26. This is our halfway point for us getting through our first year. Like I said, we've missed a couple weeks. It's my intention to continue through episode 52, through week 52, in this current format with some extra lessons and extra videos. I've filmed a bunch of snare drum comparison videos and drum set comparison videos that just need some editing. So there'll be some of those videos. I have a pretty exciting announcement coming up in a few weeks about some gear that there will be some videos that hit the channel. I want to start doing some other lessons too, maybe even some drum covers. Although I sort of envision any drum covers I do as kind of twofers. So there would be a drum cover and then also a discussion of what's going on in the tune. So let's see if we can hop back on that horse and keep that momentum going. But know that my plan is we will continue Wednesday drum pad, Friday drum set until through week 52, which is going to put us, I think, the third week in January at the rate we're going. So, what are we going to talk about this week? When I saw you last, I gave you this reading review, and we're going to go over that today. That's going to be our last thing we do today. But I've been getting a lot of questions about building up weaker hand. It seems like this is one of the most common questions I get. And I was joking with my husband that the real answer that I can give you is patience and hard work is really what it takes to build up your weaker hand, to hopefully be somewhat the equal of your stronger hand. When I was playing more marching percussion, I put in the time, and my left hand for a while was actually stronger than my right. I don't know that I was ever as comfortable leading with my left as I was my right. I didn't really feel ambidextrous. But in terms of, things like the technique and the snap and the endurance, I had all of that stronger with my left hand than my right. And the way I did that was just, I would sit in front of a TV and play eighth notes with my left hand for hours at a time, which naturally is going to build. It's like you're building one arm up to be Popeye and one arm up to be just a regular muscle, right? So that you have to be careful, even when you're trying to build up your weaker hand, that you don't get too out of control and too off balance. It is possible to succeed at building your weak hand beyond your wildest dreams. But I thought we could talk a little bit about, it's really flippant for me to say, well, hard work and patience. Okay, great. are there specific exercises we can do to kind of tackle our left hand? I'm going to assume left hand, weak hand. When I say left hand, I mean weak hand. I am a righty. My favorite drummer, Rod Morgenstein, is a lefty, so I am not ignoring left-handed drummers. It's easy for me to talk about my own weak hand as my left hand. This morning I had a brainstorm of an exercise that is sort of an expansion on an exercise that I like to do. I can't play it well yet, but I wanted to teach you guys it today, and we can talk about how to count it as well. And then I'll teach you just without, it's not going to be for the one that I brainstormed this morning. There is a worksheet down below, but then I'm going to also show you a couple other exercises which won't have worksheets. We'll just talk about them. One thing that I think is really important when you're trying to build your weak hand is trying to match it to your stronger hand. So if you have a good sense of technique and a good control, and you feel like your motion with your right hand or your strong hand is pretty good, what you want to try and do is match your weaker hand to your stronger hand. We can do that by looking straight down, but it's even more effective if we can change our perspective. One of my favorite things is to play in front of a mirror, and one of the reasons I try to give you guys an alternate perspective on my hands is so you can see what my fingers are doing, and when you try to play these back, you can try and make your hands look like mine. In some ways, looking straight down on our hands is not a super useful perspective, because I can get some information from this, but this is pretty much my normal motion, right? So there's some information that I can get from looking down, but if I'm trying to come up, this is probably about 10 inches-ish. We used to do a lot of things in drum corps 10 and 2, right? So our accents would come up, although really we tried to get our accents more all the way up. The information that I can get looking down is subject to all sorts of weird, like parallax error, which parallax just means, I'm looking from a certain angle, and so I'm getting a skewed perspective on that up-down thing. Whereas if I'm looking straight at me, so the way you're seeing my sticks, if you can see your sticks this way with a mirror, that would be super awesome. That will help. It doesn't make sense how much it helps, right? It seems sort of silly. One of my teaching studios, I have, it's like it used to be a dance studio or something. Like one wall is like half mirror, and then another teaching studio that I teach in doesn't have that. And I'm always feeling like I need to figure out some way to get, the other one is much smaller, but I need to figure out some way to get a mirror in there, because when you can see yourself from out front, you can all of a sudden see all sorts of things that you can't see from up above, especially when we're trying to do things like matching our sticks, right? And matching our sticks is all about getting your left hand to catch up with your right hand, your weak hand to catch up with your strong hand. I mentioned a couple exercises, and there's a couple that I have that I really, really love, and they're both super simple and super short. The first is just drags, a measure of drags with a paradiddle to change hands. And you can do this in an extended way. I can play, so the original form of the exercise is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, and that's great, But if I'm trying to build my weak hand, I can extend the drags with that hand. So I can do 2 measure. One of the things I talked about earlier was working my weak hand harder than my strong hand. So if I play 2 measures of drags before the paradiddle on my left side, and then just do 1 measure of drags on my right side, I'm working my left hand harder. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and paradiddle. 1 and 2 and 3 and paradiddle. Okay, so stuff like that. You can extend that as much as you want. So that was 4 measures with my left hand to 1 measure with my right. Anything you can think of to do that's going to just work your left hand harder, and it doesn't have to be. I love long exercises. Long exercises are great. They take on more identity, right? Like drum lines especially have started for a long time now, but exercises when I was younger were shorter, and nowadays exercises are these, full orchestrated kind of cool things that last like minutes long, right? And that's awesome. They become their own song. But I'm a really big fan of just taking that, what are we trying to work? And if we're trying to build our weak hand, right? Well, let's just do something physically that just builds our weak hand. And we want to do more than one thing, right? If you were lifting weights, you wouldn't just do bench presses. You wouldn't just do squats, right? You wouldn't just do one motion. But we can isolate those motions more than if we're playing longer pieces. Playing longer pieces kind of work different parts of your technique and your musicality, right? I love those. They're not what we're talking about today. So the other really short exercise I want to show you is just this one. This is one my hands were just playing around and my hands went, hey, let's do this. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I've been doing this for a million years. I'm going to separate the sticks and play on the neoprene and gum rubber so you can hear how it sounds. But it's just together, right, right, left. So it's just a group of 4 notes. And if you notice, hopefully in that camera especially, I'm opening my hand a lot to get that group of 3 notes with my right hand. Right, I'm not just relying on the bounce, I'm using my fingers. And that middle note is really kind of is more of like the stick is doing a lot of the work there, but not all of the work. I'm still using my fingers to control that motion. And I know you're saying, wait, Penny, we're working on our weak hand. Okay, so that's how I initially came up with that exercise, which pretty obviously is a jazz ride builder, right? So let's do it with our left hand. And so now it's going to be together, left, left, right. And earlier I said there was a time when my left hand was stronger than my right hand. It's not anymore. Once I stopped doing so much marching percussion and started playing drum set, I don't play open-handed, so my left hand just on drum set gets less work than my right. So my left hand, my weak hand, is not as strong as my strong hand, my right hand, anymore. But that little simple snippet, and you can extend, I'm thinking out loud here, so this isn't really stuff that I have prepared to show you, but you can extend that, right? So instead of doing a group of 4 notes, what if we do 5? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or 6 or 7, right? You can extend how many notes you're doing with the hand that's playing the multiple notes to make it harder, make it more work, change the motion a little bit. Like I was saying when we were, a few minutes ago talking about lifting weights, you want to do different motions with your hands. We're not trying to do just one technique awesome. We're trying to do all techniques awesome. That leads me to this exercise that I brainstormed this morning. Literally, this is fresh in my head. I printed it today. I'm not sure this is the way I'm super excited about it being laid out. I've hidden the time signatures. I'm not sure I'm super excited about that. I think I want some way to signify that it goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we end up with a bar of 4, 4, 16, 16th notes. What's happening is you're starting with one note with one hand, and then you're filling in however long the rest of the measure is with the other hand. Literally, I've got 1, and then 1 with my right hand, and then 1, and then 2, and then 1, and then 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, L, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, L, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. Did I mention I'm learning it? I don't think I like that way to count it. There's a lot to be said for that way to count it, but I was showing this to my husband earlier, and I think the way that I like to count it is an ever-expanding measure of 16th notes, of 4/4 counting 16th notes. So 1E, 1E, and 1E, and 1E, and 2, 1E, and 2E, 1E, and 2E, and 1E, 2E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3, 1E, and 3E, 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4, 1E, and 2, 3E, and 4E, 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4E, and 1E, and a 3, and a 4E, and a 1E, 1E, and 1E, and a, right? So like that. That seems easier to count for me instead of trying to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? Once you get into teens, counting becomes more problematic if you're trying to use the actual number. So I've already got that 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a built in. So all I have to do is remember to start the 1 in an ever expanding spot, right? And so that can be a little confusing. Let me do it a little bit slower. So 1E, and then I'm gonna, every time I play with the other hand, I wrote it so you can do this with either hand leading, but let's just do it with right, left to explain it so you understand it. I don't need to play it with both hands. the concept is what I think you need to see, and the counting. So I've got 1E, and then I'm going to start again with 1, right? But I've got to keep that 16th pulse going. 1E, 1E, and 1E, and 1E, 2, 1E, and right. So it's always got that 1 back on the lead hand has to be on that next 16th note. Every time you're expanding what you're doing with your left hand, you're adding 1 16th note. The pulse of 16th notes still has to stay the same. Let's throw on a metronome. And I think the best way to do this is just, I'm not even going to do it all that fast. Let's use the tap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, let's do it at like 200, which will mean, you know, if we were in 4/4, divide that by 4. So really this is 50 beats a minute in 4/4. Pretty mellow tempo-wise. I just want to show you the counting, right? So I'll give us 4, and then we'll be in. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1E, 1E, and 1E, and 1E, and 2. 1E, and 2E. 1E, and 2E, and 1. 2E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3. 1E, and 2E, and 3E. 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 1E, and 2. 3E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4. 1E, and 2. 3E, and 4E. 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4E, and 1E, and 2. 3E, and 4E, and 1E. 1E, and 1E, and 1E, and 2. 1E, and 2E. 1E, and 2E, and 1. 2E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3. 1E, and 2. 3E, 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 1E, and 3E, and 4. 1E, and 2E, and 4E. 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4E, and 1E, and 2E, and 3E, and 4E, and 1. In some ways, keeping track of the counting is harder than playing at first. Like I said, wrote this today, and counting that expansion is a little weird. So I didn't have time to work this up to a, hey, let me demonstrate this for you tempo. But I felt like I wanted to talk about weak hand building. And the exercise that, you know, this is kind of a variation on the, I like to do stuff like, right, so that was just groups of 5, right? So I like to do stuff like that with extensions of the multiple notes with my weak hand. And I thought, oh, hey, what about doing that as an expanding series of notes, right? I mean, it's funny as we go through this year. All these exercises we teach you, they all overlap, right? Like, I'm not doing anything that other people haven't done. These exercises are all, we're just hitting stuff with sticks, right? I mean, how wildly different could these exercises be? But I haven't done exactly this exercise in exactly this way before, and so I thought, oh, hey, that's cool, let's do that. So here you go, the expanding chop builder, yay. I want to circle back and talk just for a second before we get into our reading review. At the beginning of the lesson, I mentioned the real way to build your weak hand is patience and hard work. And then I said that that was kind of flippant, because that's not, in some ways, that's not very helpful. But I do want to underline that point a little bit. If you're serious about building up your weak hand, you need to be prepared to feel terrible, because your weak hand just is not used to doing stuff that your strong hand is used to doing. Think about all the things you do during your day: open doors, sign your name, brush your teeth, eat, and a million other things you do with your strong hand. There are people who will do those type of things with their weak hand. People will brush their hair with their weak hand, brush their teeth, eat, open doors. I think that's interesting in terms of, especially in terms of thinking about left-hand lead. I think when you train your brain to use your left hand to do those daily activities, that can really help your left hand feeling like it is leading the way in a way that some of these exercises we talked about today aren't really designed to do. And this is that, when you're lifting weights, you do a bunch of different things. Using your left hand during your day to open doors, and like I say, a million other things, can help your weak hand in a different way. Okay, so it's hard work and patience, but there's hope, right? I mean, I don't mean to be dour or negative about building your weak hand. I just want you to be prepared to feel some frustration as part of the process. Finally, let's talk about our reading review from last week, or 2 weeks ago, right? This lesson was included in our links last week in the doobly-doo. It will, again, be down below in the doobly-doo. And this is what it says. This is a review. We're halfway through the year. I felt like this was a good time to check in because I'm not seeing you guys play. I want you to have some way to be able to tell if you are keeping up, especially with the reading, right? A big part of these lessons is these worksheets that we've been working from. I want to know that you guys are doing okay with reading, and that's why I gave this to you before, and now we're going over it. So you had time to look at it, hopefully. That's why I gave you the extra week. And now we'll talk about each example. We'll talk about it. We'll play through each example with the metronome at a couple different tempos so you can see how they sound and you can see how you did. And hopefully everything made sense. Number one, I think, is pretty easy. We've got some 16th notes and a 5-stroke roll on the and after 4 in the first measure and 1 flam. 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2, 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and a 4, 1 and a 2, 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and a 4. Let's try that with the metronome. First, we're going to do 75 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2, 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and a 4. And the second tempo we're going to do is 105. So let's jump this up to 105. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 2, we've got some 16th, 8th, 16th rhythms in the second measure. But besides that, we're still pretty straightforward, I think. So we've got 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3 and 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E, a 4E and. Again, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3 and 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E, a 4E and. Let's try it with the metronome at 75 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3 and 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E, a 4E and 1E and 2E and a 3 and 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E, a 4E and. And let's try it at 105. 1, 2, ready, go. In number 3, starting out with a 7-stroke roll, and then I've got a 16th rest on beat 3. And then in the second measure, on beats 1 and 2, I've got this figure we haven't seen too much. It's a 16th and then a dotted 8th. So that figure just sounds like 1E and a 2E and a. And then on beat 4, in the second measure, it starts with a 16th rest, and then I've got a 16th and an 8th, so it's 4E and. In the second measure, I've got a 16th and then a dotted 8th and then a dotted 8th and then a 16th, which creates this kind of expanding, contracting feeling from the notes. So the second measure, the timing is 1E and 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. Okay, so there's a lot of offbeats in there. The whole thing sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and 1E and a 2, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. With a metronome, 75. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And now at 105. 1, 2, 3, 4. I like the second measure on that one quite a bit. It creates this really off-kilter feeling until you get to the and after 4. So in number 4, we've got a few more rolls going on. We've got a 9-stroke to start, and then an 8th rest, So a 5-stroke into beat 4, and then a 5-stroke in the second measure. Number 4 sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and 3 and 4. Again. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and 3 and 4. Let's try it with metronome at 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And now at 105, 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. In number 5, we're taking out most of the rolls except for one, and that's a 17-stroke roll. So that lasts 2 full beats in the second measure. And number 5 sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2 and a 3E and 4, 1E and a 2E and a 3E a 4. Again. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2 and a 3E and 4, 1E and a 2E and a 3E a 4. Try that with a metronome, 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And now at 105. 1, 2, ready, go. In number 6, we have some more accents, and we have another 16th rest, and another 7-stroke roll. Number 6 sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and 1 and 2 and 3E and a 4E and. Again. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and 1 and 2 and 3E and a 4E and. Let's try that with a metronome at 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, ready, go. 105 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a. In number 7, I've got some longer rolls that travel over the first bar line into the second measure. I guess just that one roll. But besides that, number 7 seems pretty straightforward. Got some quarter notes even. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3 and 4. In a few of these examples, I have 16th notes that stop on the In the second measure here, I've got an accent on 2, 2E and then 3 and. And that can be a little disorienting. We haven't seen that too much. I really like that as a kind of way to, it drags people in. When you're expecting a beat, and instead you hear, it's like, wait, what happened? Right? It's almost like not resolving a chord in the way that people expect. It's a little different. It's not quite so harsh as an unresolved, dominant to tonic chord, but it can be a little unsettling, and I like that tension that can create. So, number 7, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3E and a 4. Again, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3E and a 4. Let's try it with metronome, 75 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a 1. And now at 105 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. In number 8, I have groups of 3/16 notes going across the beat. But then I have a roll that starts on beat 4. And if we remember our polyrhythms, we're going to have kind of a 4 against 3 thing going on here. I've got 4 groups of 3 going against 3 quarter notes. So the pattern is 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and a 3E and 4, right? But if you just think to yourself, okay, I got 4 groups of 3, right? It gets so much easier. You have to think about it much less. I'll count it for you again, but counting is awesome, and counting is how you know where you are sometimes. But there are different ways to count, and I have that very American system of 1E and a 2E and a, And I like that. I've been using that forever. There are other counting systems that other people swear are better. Maybe. I'm not really prepared to argue about it. I really like 1-iana, 2-iana, and so on. To me, it does a lot of things that other counting systems don't. But it very well might just be that it's what I've used for a million years, and so it's what I'm used to. But this is an example where I'm not really thinking 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and a 3E and 4. I'm not really thinking 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. Right, if I am, I kind of feel like something's gone wrong, right? And I'm thinking too much. Let's try it with a metronome. And I think you'll see. I'm not counting, I'm just thinking block, 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 block. I'm just feeling those 4 groups of 3 against the quarter note. 1, 2, 3-iana, 4-iana. And so same thing, let's try it at 105. Same thing, I'm not really counting those first 3 beats of 16th notes as, at 105 I'm not really counting 1-iana, 2-iana, 3-iana, 4 anyway. But especially with a pattern like this, I'm feeling the melody of the pattern, the musicality of the rhythm. 1, 2, 3-iana, 4-iana. Okay, so there are times where, I love counting and I'm a very big fan of counting, and until my students can prove to me that they can count out loud seamlessly and easily and that they understand, the counting system that I'm trying to teach them, I make people count out loud because that's important to me. But when then you actually go to playing music, sometimes there are ways to count that make more sense than that system that I use, the 1-iana, 2-iana. Number 9, super simple. Number 9 is one of the easiest ones. 16th notes and quarter notes with a dotted 8th and a 16th right at the end, right? 3-iana, 4-iana, 1-iana, 2, 3-iana, 4, 1-iana, 2-iana, 3-iana, 4, 1-iana, 2, 3-iana, 4, 1-iana, 2-iana, 3-iana, 4. With metronome at 75. 1, 2, 3-iana, 4-iana, 1-iana, 2, 3-iana, 4, 1-iana, 2-iana, 3, 4. Okay, and at 105, 1, 2, 3-iana, 4-iana. So I'm going to make you pay for that now. Number 9 is one of the easiest ones on the page. Number 10 is one of the trickiest. We've got a 9-stroke roll. No. We've got a We've got an 11-stroke roll to start out, and then we've got these flams with the 16th, 8th, 16th pattern, and then at the very end we've got flams with a 16th and the dotted 8th pattern. So number 10 sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E, a 4E, a 1 and 2E and a 3E, a 4E, 1E and a 2E, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E. Yeah, that was right. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E, a 3E, a 4E, a 1 and 2E and a 3E, a 4E, 1E and a 2E, a 3E, a 4E, 1 and 2E and a 3E, a 4E, 1E and a 2E, a 3E, a 4E, a 1 and 2E and a 3E, a 4E, 1E and a 2E, a 3E, a 4E, a 1 and 2E and a 3E, a 4E. Let's try it with the metronome at 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. Okay, and now at 105. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. Number 10 isn't too bad, but coming off number 9, it really feels like the difficulty kind of dips for number 9 and then jumps right back up to where most of them are. Number 11, the tricky bit for me, there's a couple tricky points for number 11. We've got that 8th rest on beat 3 in the first measure, which isn't super tricky, but just kind of confuses the 9-stroke roll, which starts on the and of beat 1, which is definitely a tricky thing, right? We've got an 8th note right on beat 1, and then the 9-stroke roll starts on the and we definitely haven't seen that before. Most of the time with things like 9-stroke rolls and whatever, they'll be like broken up in ways where you're not going over a beat like this. This is a little bit more like legit style writing, a little bit more old school. People definitely write like this, and this is a totally acceptable way to write, but a lot of times you'll see rolls broken up in a different way to be a little bit less confusing to read. And then in the second measure, we've got a 7-stroke roll that starts on the E after 1. The rest of the second measure isn't too bad, but that roll on E, that's kind of one of those, you're expecting the downbeat on 1 and you don't get it. So even as a player, that can kind of be confusing, let alone for an audience member. So let's give this a try. 3E and a 4E and a 1 and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and 4. Again. 3E and a 4E and a 1 and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and 4. Let's try it with a metronome. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a 1 and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and And now at 105. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, in number 12, I've got a lot of those 16th dotted 8th figures. And I've got a 15 stroke roll to start out the measure, and then just an extended roll at the end, longer than a 17 stroke roll. Number 12, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. Again, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. So that roll in the second measure is pretty long. Let's try it with a metronome at 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And at 105. 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a. In number 13, we start ratcheting the difficulty back up for our last push through some of these. Although in number 13, I've got a similar thing going on where we had the flams and the groups of 3. Now I've got a tap and then a 5-stroke roll basically kind of rolling against the beat, and it sort of has the same effect. When you look at the first beat, you could almost say to yourself, oh wait, this is a 6-stroke roll, and maybe it is for the first beat, but let's think about what's going on. 1E and a, right? 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Right? 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. So same thing. I'm not thinking about counting that way. I'm just thinking, right? And then the second measure is just 1 and 2 and 3E and a, 4E and. Right? 3E and a, 4E and. 3E and a, 4E and. That could also feel like a 6-stroke roll. But again, I kind of don't think it does because I'm not accenting beat 4. I've got this weird thing going on. Right? There we go. Right? So it kind of doesn't feel like a 6-stroke roll on beat 3 in the second measure. The whole thing, 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 2 and again 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 and 2 and 3E and a 4E and with a metronome, 75 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. One, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And at 105, 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a. I think most of these that are tricky are tricky. They're not necessarily difficult. At least I think so. Number 14 has a similar kind of thing that I'm going to do 2 16th notes and then a flam, and then 2 16th notes and then a flam. I've got a 16th rest in the middle there, and it doesn't shake out exactly like our other patterns, but it kind of can trick you into thinking that. Number 14 sounds like this. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4. 1E and 2E and a 3 and a 4E. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4. 1E and 2E and a 3 and a 4E. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4. With a metronome at 75. 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a. That one I was working out a little. I don't know if you caught me. This one is definitely on the tricky side. Let's try it at 105 and see what happens. I might work it out a little for you as I go too. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the nice thing is I didn't have to work that one out. I pretty much played that basically right. I mean, it's a little loose, but I didn't make any mistakes. And that's what happens sometimes, right? Sometimes they're a little bit tricky or slower. Sometimes they're a little bit tricky faster. Sometimes when you work them out slow, you can play them fast, right? That's an old truism, that when you can play it slow, you can play it fast. It doesn't always work in reverse. When you can play it fast, you can play it slow. Definitely for number 14, I found it a little easier, a little quicker. Number 15, I've got some weird rolls going on in the first measure, and then the second measure I've got some flam taps and some more rolls. I think number 15 might be our trickiest in terms of rolls. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2 and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and 3E and a 4E and a, again 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. One more time. 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. This is another one. There's a lot of it feels like it's falling over the edge. So let's try it with a metronome at 75 beats a minute and see how it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's try it at 105. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that one was kind of all over the place. I played it pretty well the first few times, and then I was like, oh, I will play this more to show them how it goes. And then I started making mistakes. And then I wanted to get it back, and the last couple times, I was pretty much on it for y'all. A thing I say, and I shouldn't say this, I should just be better prepared. One of the things about me teaching these, doing these videos, like as if you were in the room with me, I make mistakes when I teach, right? and I edit out a lot of mistakes that I make, but you know, I'm doing 2 45-ish minute videos a week, which is a lot of editing, let me tell you. There's writing exercises, there's filming, there's editing, blah, blah, blah. And just the time constraint is a lot of these exercises I'm writing, and either I haven't played them in years or I've never learned them exactly. And so I'm just not spending the time to work these up like I hope you are. I promise you, if I spent time practicing these, I could play them really well. But I'm writing them, and videotaping them. And yeah. Okay, so lastly, number 16. Now we've got some of those 16th, 8th, 16 patterns. And then a nice long roll in the second measure. 16 is a nice easy way to finish us out. 3E and a 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E and a 4E, a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. Again, 3E and a 4E and a 1E, a 2E, a 3E and a 4E, a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. Metronome at 75 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And at 105. 1, 2, 3E and a 4E and a. And there it is. That's our reading review. Hopefully you got through these in the last 2 weeks, and us going over them right now literally was just a review. Hopefully you understood all these rhythms, and these rhythms made sense, and you could play through them. And maybe you can't play them at 105 beats per minute, but maybe you can play them at 75. That is okay to keep moving ahead. If you had trouble playing these patterns at even 75 beats per minute, maybe this is a place to stop and do some either reviewing of your reading, or maybe this is a time where you should focus, maybe the flams gave you lots of troubles. Work hard on your flams. Maybe the double strokes gave you lots of trouble. Work hard on your double strokes. One of the reasons I took the mid-year point to do a review like this is because I wanted us to have a nice point of demarcation to be able to say, hey, half a year, how you doing? How's everybody doing? Are you doing good? Are these lessons feeling like too much? Are they feeling like not enough? Let's do a reading review and see where everyone is. And I would love to hear how you found this exercise. Was it too hard? Was it too easy? Were you waiting for the last 2 weeks thinking, yes, Penny, we get it, it's easy? Or were your eyes glazing over at some of these patterns? And if that's the case, like I say, it might be a sign that you should back up and look at some of the lessons where we talked about reading. There's nothing here we haven't talked about. A thing that's going to change in the coming weeks is we're going to start to use some textbooks, some drum books in our lessons. And either you can watch me play the exercises and try and learn them by ear, or I'm going to try and pick books that I'm going to recommend for you all to buy. And, they're on the cheaper side because most of them are classics, which means most of them don't have CDs and most of them aren't, $30 books. And so our lessons are going to change a little bit. It's still going to be a lot of me talking, a lot of me teaching, but instead of constantly new exercises from me in the doobly-doo, there'll still be those. But we're going to do some lessons out of some books too. We'll talk more about that next week, and I'll give you a book list for the rest of the year, and we'll go from there. But tell me how you did. Tell me how you feel about this review. Was this review too difficult? Should I slow down? Should we talk more about what some of these patterns sound like, what some of these patterns look like? Do you feel like you want to do some reviews on rolls? Do you feel like we're right on track and this is awesome? Or is this too easy? Honestly, if this is too easy, this probably isn't the perfect series for you. Most of my students that I see one-on-one, we're halfway through the year, so we're 6 months in. Most of these examples, pupils that I have one-on-one in actual starting from scratch lessons, say like an 8 or 9 year old kid, they're not doing these exercises after 6 months, right? So, and we've had that talk before too about how this has turned into sort of a sampler year and not exactly a we're starting from scratch and doing a week by week progression. But let me know. Let me know how the review seemed. Did you guys all get A's? I'd be super happy if you all got A's. Well, no, then I made the test too easy, right? So let's see. The average grade should be like a C plus or a B minus, right? With a couple A's and a couple F's, unfortunately. All right, we have hit penny rambling phase. I apologize again about last week. I am not going to promise to not miss weeks in the future. Life happens. But we're going to try and keep it at a minimum. And like I say, you're going to get 52 of these, right? So even if it takes us until next March, we're going to get 52 of these drum pad and drum set your first year of drum lessons series. Hopefully with other stuff along the way too, mixed in. And then next year we'll reassess. Probably what'll happen is there'll be one long lesson a week and more shorter lessons. And probably a couple live streams. I keep threatening to live stream, and I want to do a couple things to make sure my gear and my setup is a little bit more solid before I do that. But once I've done that, then we'll do some live streaming stuff, and that'll be super fun because then we can more talk. I still won't be able to see you play, which stinks. I wish I could see y'all play. But anywho, join me on Friday. One of the things we're going to talk about on Friday is more we can stuff. And it's probably going to be a really basic approach. It's basically going to be, hey, let's play ride patterns with our left hand. But we'll also talk about a little bit of motion and leading and what happens when we have to lead with our left hand, when we have to do something awkward. But that's it for today. I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up if you like this video. It would be great if you subscribe to the channel, go through, watch the previous 25 weeks of your first year of drum lesson videos. Find me on Facebook and Instagram at Penny Larson Drums, and I will see y'all on Friday. All right. I love you guys. Thanks for being with me today. Take care. Bye-bye.